Hello, I'm Jay Sayers. This is the FileMaker STL meetup for January 2023, our first one for 2023. And I've got a group of friends with me, colleagues from Skeleton Key. The topic today is FileMaker, basically the product of that Claris has out there right now, the whole product line of version 19.6. A lot of different new features. I've asked some of my crew to chip in with me, so not just one presenter tonight. We want to walk through what is new, and I think the plan right now is we'll start off with FileMaker Pro. We've got a few people lined up, then you know who you are. We'll refer to our sheet. But in December of 2022, we were really excited that the latest version had come out with transactions. It's probably the big hot topic. Greg, are you in a position to run your demo, or would you like me to run through a couple of other things first?
No, I'm happy to jump in, and I don't think it will take a lot of time for me, but I'm going to point everyone to a bunch of resources and give kind of an overview. So the new feature in FileMaker 19.6 to support transaction script steps, it's important. It's a big milestone for the product. There have been ways to do transactional scripting in FileMaker for a long time. And those techniques are great. We've used them in a lot of places, but having a new dedicated set of script steps and functions that allow us to support script transactions will really kind of take that to the next level. So I wanted to point out a few resources here. I'm not going to go very deep on this because lots of other people have already gone really deep on this, and I'm going to point you to some resources here so that you can go dig in really deep with this if you're interested in it. And I know not everyone is. It's not something that you have to do to use FileMaker, but for certain types of things that you might do in FileMaker, it is really important. If you're doing financial transactions where you need a set of record changes to all happen or none of them happen, transactions are the way to do that. So a really simple example here is this little script that you see here to open a transaction. Then you go to the first record in the table, you set a field to a value, you go to the next record and set a field to a value, and then you commit that transaction. So what will happen here is that either both of these things will happen or neither one of them will. And that's really important in certain types of systems where if you're doing a financial transaction, you're taking money out of one account and you're putting it in another account, you want to make sure that both of those happen or that neither one happens. So these new script steps allow you to do that. So this blog post from the Claris engineering blog, I think, gives some really good examples, working with multiple records and related tables, working with talking about nested transactions. And this is important, that you can only have one transaction at a time. You can't nest a transaction inside of another transaction, but you can have subscripts and things. A transaction all happens within the same window, but you can have subscripts that are moving to different layouts and doing things within that script that that all work within a single transaction. And they give some good examples here of how that works. You can revert transactions. And in fact, if an error occurs, you can revert the transaction and give a custom kind of error code and message. And so there's a lot of great techniques you can use with that. It gathers a lot of information about what was happening there and allows you to report on that and handle the error appropriately. There's a little Q&A down here, so that gives some additional information about what you can and can't do with transactions. And then I was just going to point out the help page. I'm going to put all four of these links for the tabs I've got here into the chat in just a moment. But the help documentation for FileMaker Pro has lots of good information and talks about all of the script steps and the functions related to transactions that are relevant here. Talks about how this works with ESS and various things. So definitely worth digging into and really understanding what's going on there. Corn Walker at Proofgeist has a great blog post about transactions in FileMaker 19.6. I'd encourage you to dig into that, and there's lots of great information in there. And then I was also going to point out Vince Manano's Meetup presentation from last month at Dig FM, where he spent an hour or so talking about transactions in FileMaker. And he started at the very beginning. I didn't get through the entire thing yet, but I'm going to. It was interesting and lots of great information. So he, makes the case for why you would want to use transactions, and really digs into that and shows some good examples. So let me share each of those links. And so here's my very simple sample file, the meeting sample file. And I just wrote a very quick script here to open a transaction, create a record in the meeting details table, or the meetings table, I should say. We're going to set a field value and then grab the ID of that record. And then we're going to go off to the action items table, which is a related table, create a record there, set its foreign key, set its subject name, and then create another record in that same table and set the ID and give it a subject. And then we commit the transaction. So if we just run this script, we should get one record in the meetings table and two action items, which is exactly what we have here. All right, so let me delete this record, and then I'm going to step through this with the debugger. And we open the transaction, we create the record. So here we have our record. We're going to set the field for the title. We're going to grab the ID from the meetings record. We'll go to the action items table. We'll create a new record. We'll set the ID there, set the subject. And then if we cancel this script, so I'm just going to hit stop in the debugger, what we should have is no records in the action items table. And if we go back to the meeting table, no records here. So we saw that the record got created, but we were inside of that transaction. So because we stopped the script, it basically reverted both of the changes that had been made, the new record in the action items table and the record in the meeting details. So that's just a really quick, simple example, but I hope it gives you an idea of how this works. I know I didn't get into any of the error handling or reverting transactions or anything like that, but there's a lot to dig into there, a lot to understand, and I'd encourage you to check out those resources. Jay, I hope I covered everything you were hoping for there, but any questions about transactions?
The one thing I was going to point out that I did see in the documentation in that initial blog post, the engineering blog post, was that the transaction needs to occur all in the same window. Does that sound right? You read that too?
Yes.
That caught my attention. So you cannot be running a transaction in one window and think that you can open a new window and keep going with that transaction. I couldn't tell you what would happen right there, but it's all got to stay in the same window, which is actually probably pretty decent when it comes to Windows management. There, if it's easy enough for you, a little show of hands. There's reactions at the bottom of Zoom if you can find them quickly enough. Show of hands if you've ever hand built a transaction technique or use the roll your own transaction technique. Robert, yeah. Good. Brad, Valentine, Marty, awesome. So this should really take out the pain points that were there in the past if you have done them. All right, back to our release notes. Thanks, Greg. And as he mentioned, there's a lot to that. There are a couple of other script steps. There's one script step here called revert transaction. He didn't show you that, but that is a deliberate reason to revert the transaction. And I take it back. He did show it in the documentation as we were listing it, just not in that demo. But if you needed to revert a transaction because of an error otherwise, that script step is there. I'll jump down here as well. I believe there is a new function, the new get transaction open state. So if you do have an existing transaction running at the time, it'll return 1. Otherwise, it will return 0, false. Skipping ahead a little bit, but helping to tie together what I've seen in the release notes. Nothing to show really quickly here, but it's always good to point out that FileMaker Pro is now supporting Ventura 13, so the latest and greatest of the Mac OS. And I can attest, like I said earlier in the first part of our meetup that we didn't record, Mojave is a compatible Mac OS, so it's quite a wide range that FileMaker Pro and Server are able to run on. There's a new sign-in with Apple. Sign in with your Apple ID. We don't have a demo for you today, right, Greg? Yeah. One thing we could say is that Apple ID is just now another authentication option for opening a file, very similar to the Amazon authentication or Google authentication, where groups are not supported. I've got one of my pals, Matt Howard's going to walk us through real quick of this new set dictionary script step. And Matt, if you can find the share button, feel free to take it away.
So, yep, it's just going to be a real quick run through of the set dictionary. It is a new spelling script step to allow users to script the specific spelling language that they want to change the main dictionary to, and also the file path. Again, simple description. The script step sets the language for the main dictionary and the path. So that way, instead of manually using the edit menu, spelling, select dictionary, or if maybe a privilege set doesn't have the capability to actually edit that menu and select that dictionary, you can script that process now and also select that path. If for some reason you don't specify the file path, it acts almost exactly as the select dictionaries. So nothing really new there. It's simple script steps. Right now I just pass different things in. Hit that button, test dictionary. It'll grab the test dictionary UPR that I set up on my desktop for that file. If I want to switch it over to test, mats, or say I want to switch the actual language to English medical spelling, select dictionaries. It's set to English medical. If I want to set it to English, it is as simple as that. One use case that Jay and I bounced around that we could think of was if, say, you had like a publishing company who sends out files for multiple clients with multiple languages, and they want to spell check that. Instead of going through individually, they can set up different buttons or script it out where it can switch for them, and then they can use that spell check with whatever language that they want to use. So again, quick, short, and to the point.
We're digging deeper. We're getting into microseconds. Greg, can you talk about that a little bit? Maybe a use case for get current time UTC microseconds.
So I think for measuring performance of your scripts or custom functions or things like that, having a little more accuracy there, or a little more precision, I should say, not just milliseconds, but microseconds, lets you measure some of those transaction things a little more accurately. So I think there are lots of cases you could use that. I'm glad to see it 1,000 times more detail.
Jessie Cisneros, feel free to steal screen sharing here.
So I'll be presenting about the get last error location, the new function in the new release. It's very similar to get last error. Get last error returns, if you are not aware of, returns the error number of the error that occurred. Last error location will return the script name, the step name, and the line number of where the error had occurred. So let's dive in and see what occurs there. I'm going to run this script, which it's going to perform a find that it won't be able to find the record with this find. It's that I kind of made that occurred here. So you can see I do return a 401 since I'm not able to find that record. And let's go down here where I'm trapping the last error location values. Again, as I said in the documentation there, it will return the script name, the script step that the error occurred in, and as well as the line number of where that occurred. So very simple there. Some notes regarding that function is that as get last error, the following control script steps do not clear the last error condition reported by FileMaker Pro. So if you run any of these control script steps, it won't clear the error that had occurred. So you're able, and I'll show you what that means. If you're able to run a lot of these control script steps here, and the error will persist until you actually hit a script step that is not one of these control script steps. So as you see there, I did get my error, but if I were to continue forward here, none of these control script steps are clearing that error. And as well as if we do cancel an action, for example, import records with dialog on, if I were to cancel it, it would not clear that error as well, just for the people that don't know about this. So as I cancel there, error still persists as you're seeing. I'm going to keep continuing forward, and here's my set variable script step. It clears the error, but I'm able to grab that information. Just a note, since there, we have get last error and get last error location now. If you need a trap for both of them, if you need to actually like get those information into separate variables, as you're seeing here, like I'm doing here, it's not going to work, right? Because set variable is a script step that is going to clear the error at first. So I'm able to trap the first call there for get last error, but when I get down to get last error location, I'm not able to set that into the variable. If I look at my data viewer, you're not seeing get error location set here because line 7 had cleared that error. So just a note, you can use a let statement to set variables within a script, which I'm doing here, to set them into different variables so you can use them however you need.
I might have a question, and it kind of overlaps with the transactions, and it's something I have not tested yet. But curious if anyone bumped into this. So get last error location gets fed into the get last error detail when it comes from a subscript of a transaction, I think, or maybe not even, but it's within the transaction. The thing is, get last error detail is also what FileMaker uses to convey when you have a record lock with another user, who that user is. So I'm just curious as to if we're losing something, or if the content will output both with carriage returns, or I'm just if anyone has bumped into this or not. Just curious.
It's a good question, Robert. I'm going to share the screen because that was one of the new functions that we're going to bring up here. Just to be clear, the prior function was called get last external error detail. Some of you might have recalled that. Now they've renamed it something a little more simple. Yeah, get last error detail. And you were describing that it's used within a transaction to report some issues, but it's also, just to reiterate your question or reframe it, it's also used to get those previous details that we may have had prior to having the transaction related script steps. Is that accurate?
Yes, and for one of those items, I expect them to kind of happen at the same time. So that's why I'm like wondering what's the output going to be in that scenario.
It's a good question. Greg, have you come across anything that might have detailed that in any of the blog posts that may have been related to this function and the transactions? If not, we can tear into it sometime.
Yeah, I don't think I have a good answer to that. The three functions, get last error detail, and get last error location. There's a lot of detail in there, and I can't articulate a good example of the case that you're asking about, Robert. Sorry. I'll take a look at it.
All right, we'll move on here. There were a couple of things that I really couldn't demo for you today, just some notes within the release notes about the updated libraries for both JSON, CPP library, chart director, and OpenSSL. I think, Greg, if you mentioned it in a discussion we had earlier today, that most of these are probably related to performance and or security. One thing I could show you is this next section, showing the sign-in fields, even when OAuth or ADFS is enabled. Some of us may have encountered this in the earlier version of FileMaker Pro, earlier than 19.6, where we might create we might have these groups enabled, but the show sign-in fields were not checked for us. That option was not checked. Let me move this file over to this screen just so I can show you. This is not part of the demo just yet, but where you will find those options are under file options. And this is the checkbox that we're talking about. I think I can demonstrate the old way by accident, actually. So the old way would have been creating a new file. And if I had selected one of these, I believe this is how I did it today. I'm going to select one of the starter templates, the content management version, and I'll just replace the version that I had there. Save that. And let me bring that back over to the window here. If we were to go to its file options, you can see that it was not checked. So I thought, oh, maybe I don't understand the feature well enough, but I think it's based on that starter file that was included, because I'll do this just to demonstrate what the release notes were talking about. If I create new, and I'm going to do a blank one this time, and we'll just name this, replace that untitled one there. Sure, we'll replace it. Go ahead and let it add its default table, and I'll bring that new file back here with file options. Now that checkbox is on by default. So even if you have OAuth configured for your server, we'll get these fields in there. I'm not going to go into the detail of what all of this means, the OAuth and the ADFS, but I could certainly answer a question offline for you if you needed some more details about that. Here's my demo for that file that I had earlier. You can now disable the context menus for an interactive container field. Let me find that interactive container field that I put together. Before we had things, you couldn't have disabled this contextual menu. So I have a PDF is set up to be interactive content. So I've got quite a few things that I can do as a user, right? We've got the normal scrolling. I could also use any of these contextual functions, which I think are pretty cool. I didn't even really use those in the past. I've duplicated the layout and put that same field, but now I've limited that. Let me show you where the setup is of that really quickly. There's that checkbox. Hopefully you folks can read that remotely. Disable context menu. So what that does is I'm right-clicking right now. You can't tell. I don't have any of those menus available to me, but I can still scroll through the document the way that it was set up. Apparently, I put side-by-side pages on that previous layout. So if you have to protect what users can do or can't do within your interactive container field, you should be able to do that now with a simple checkbox. Some users, you may have had some users that you've supported in the past, and they say something's just wrong. Like everybody else in the office place, their layout looks fine, but something's really weird on my copy of the FileMaker application. And that just might be solved. You may have sent them there in the past to find how to delete their temporary files. Claris has made it a lot easier to do that. Let's do this. We're going to go to the preferences area. And right here under the general tab, there's a single button to delete the cache temp file. So deleting that, you get a little warning or confirmation message. We'll just delete that, find out if that helped out your users. At least it's a really quick way. If you've ever walked them through how to find the temporary files, it's pretty long and arduous. I'd like to welcome and introduce Adam Nguyen to the group here. It's his first time with the Meetup, FileMaker STL Meetup. He is brand new as of January 2nd to Skeleton Key and is already volunteered to demo one exciting new feature in FileMaker Pro 19.6. Take it away, Adam.
So I'm going to go over this bit. So let me share my screen. All right, so I'm gonna talk about this piece about creating add-ons. In the past, the method has been to use the script step called the save a copy as add-on package script step. There's been some different ways of trying to create an add-on. I've seen DB services use just try to export out a portal as an add-on just by creating a button next to it and just clicking on that, and that will just run that script. What Claris has introduced here is going to be just an option under the tools menu bar. And let me demonstrate this by showing all of you the familiar add-on that we have here at Skeleton Key. So let me just pull that up. So we've got simple color swap here. When you open up simple color swap, it actually shows the this manager right here. So, but there's there is an actual layout in here. If we go to layout manager, in order to create an add-on, you have to name this new layout as this FM add-on template directives en. So,
and I will chat the URL to these release notes, Adam, so people can see the steps that you're going to take.
So we go to that layout. In your cases, whenever you create an add-on, you create this layout and start creating an add-on right here. In order to create the add-on, in this case, is you go into layout mode, you select your grouped object, which is in the case just this button right here. We're going to go to tools, then we have this create add-on button right here. So we're going to click on that, and it's going to give you options as to how you want to name it, description and category, which will be relevant when we install this add-on. So I'm going to name it a little bit differently for the purpose of demo. So SKS add-on, then we're going to describe it, changes colors. I know it does a lot more than that, but just for the purposes of demo, let's make it quick here. So category, UI editing, for example. And then after you're done here, you can just go ahead and click create. So we'll do that. After you click on that button, you should see this this pop up in the Finder. So if you can just take a look at it. They should show you the list of add-ons that you have in your machine. It's going to be here just in case you want it. You know, you could potentially give it to your clients, for example. So it's going to be right here. Go to browse mode right here. Don't save it. Let's pretend that in your new solution here, you want to add simple color swap. So go to your new solution and then go to manage layouts, create a new layout. It can be based on any table that you have. In this case, just put it on contact, but I'm not going to put anything in there. But let's go to that layout now. In order to add on your add-on, we're going to go here. There's nothing on the list here because we have to install it first. So let's click on that plus sign, and then the add-on is already in that folder, so it should be showing up here. We named it SKS which is right here. And just as an just to further explain why Claris is asking for those details, you see the category showing up here as UI editing, just like I wrote. Description is written here, changes colors, and the name of the add-on as well. You just choose that, and then we have it installed right here. And before I actually put it in here, we can just make sure that all these relevant tables related to simple color swap are actually added. So just ignore these. You'll see all these simple color swap related tables. Okay, and then we can just add it right here. Simple color swap. Then let's save this and go to browse mode. There you go. Your add-on is created. So yeah, so this is how the new create add-on button works. As the note says, it is still in preview mode. You can go ahead and test it out on your add-ons. Let me know if you have any questions on this.
That was awesome. And pretty much anybody could do this. Not to take away from you. I really liked your demo and it was extremely intelligent. But what I meant to say was the workflow, the process that Claris has given us in this latest release makes the process so simple. One other comment I would add, I don't want to make this all about add-ons here, but you know, Simple Color Swap is a fully fleshed out application. It's meant to give a lot of features, very, very rich, and it's thoroughly tested. But perhaps there are other reasons you might want add-ons. Like you did a nice tab control. You like exactly the way it's styled and the name of it. And boy, I'm using it over in this application and I'd love to put it in this other one. Even something as simple as that can be an add-on. Of course, you can copy and paste some things, but if you have other like table dependencies, and relationship dependencies, script dependencies, you can get that functionality from one application to another very, very quickly, especially with this new workflow. Thanks for doing that, Adam. Greg, I don't know if you got my message back channel, but I was wondering if you could run us through some of those addressed issues as fast as you want to, and I'm happy to share my screen.
So I did not see your message there, Jay, but if you want to share your screen, I'd be happy to try and.
You might just highlight these for us. We've got some other things that we'll cover in server. So here are the addressed issues, and I'll let you pick your favorites.
So yeah, I mean, most of these are pretty self-explanatory, right? I'm looking for any that really stand out. I definitely had seen some rendering performance reports where people said that FileMaker Pro, earlier versions of Pro 19 were slower than version 18. And hopefully many of those issues have been fixed. Let me see which ones stand out here. I've seen the issue of FileMaker Pro quitting when dragging files to a web viewer. That one is a good fix. Let's see what else stands out here. There's a lot of issues. Many of these I've never run into, have not seen them. One thing that I've been really impressed with whenever I've reported an issue in the community forum, it's always exciting to get that reply that says this issue has been fixed in version 19.6 or whatever. So I'm really glad that Claris is doing that. And many of these kinds of issues are things that have been reported in the report an issue page in the community forum. It's great to see them here.
If I'm remembering, yeah, I was going to say, if I'm remembering correctly, this release 19.6 was something that Claris was even like, I don't want to say bragging, but really made light of. Like there were a number of addressed issues that were going to be released in 19.6.
Yeah, the last two versions have been 19.5 and 19.6 both had many hundreds.
Thank you, Rosemary. I knew you'd know.
I don't know the exact numbers anymore off the top of my head, but yeah, there's been a lot.
Greg, anything else you want me to scroll down or point out here?
Yeah, I was just scanning through these. I apologize. Okay. I did not see your message earlier.
That's okay. I like the fix for the FedEx URL in case anybody's used tracking numbers in the web viewer dialog box. There's a whole list of bugs here that have been addressed. And we can switch gears to a whole other application. Bryce is ready to go. He's got a couple of things that he was going to talk about with server. As an introduction, just really quickly though, I'll point out that macOS Ventura is also now compatible with FileMaker Server, same kind of sign-on with Apple, a number of updated libraries, and then we get into some of the juicy stuff. Bryce, my friend, feel free to deal screen sharing. And
speaking of versions and compatibility, I just wanted to point out, I saw in your notes also in Teams that FileMaker Server 19.6 has officially dropped support for Windows Server 2016. So that could be a good reason to get off of that and onto new versions of Windows. You guys seeing my jumble of windows over here, all good?
we are.
Perfect. So there's a couple of new features that I'll be going over. A couple of simple ones, couple of ones that we find to be pretty important. I'll just kind of go in the order of the tabs up here. The first one that I want to show is the new backup schedule type. But as long as I've been around, there's always been the option to create a FileMaker scheduled backup that also clones the files. Creating clones can be useful for various reasons. One of the biggest reasons we use clones is for committing changes to our repositories, whether it be weekly, daily, whatever changes happen. But occasionally, you may want to do that while users are connected to a file. You can create clones locally on a file, but you'd have to close it on the server, kicking out everyone that's in there. Or you have to run a full backup, which if you have a large files, that can sometimes take a while to actually produce that backup and also create that clone. And so what Claris has released finally is an option to clone only. I went ahead and just created a quick schedule here. As you'll see, there's the verify, clone, clone only. You can only choose some of them together. Clone only is its own option. One thing that I do really want to point out here is that the location of the clones only folder is not actually in the backups folder itself. That's something that I actually got tripped up on my first time running through this because I was not aware of that. As soon as I ran this for the first time, I went looking. This is the server that we're looking at there. Well, looking up in the backups folder and wasn't there. I was a little confused, but looking at this path, you can find it. It's kind of similar, I guess, to progressive backups, how those are separate from the backup schedules themselves. So it's called clones only. And then in there, you'll see the same kind of structure you'd be familiar with seeing in backups or progressive backups, whatever folders they're in, subfolders to say the databases folder, and the clone itself. Like I said, various use cases for that. One that quickly comes to mind for us specifically is being able to quickly obtain a clone and commit it to the repository. I'd love to hear if anyone else has use cases, but that's all that I was able to come up with.
You said to come up with one for a repository. That's the only one you came up with?
Only, yeah, quick idea I came up with.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it would be really good if when you're in I'll say the recommended environment, where you have maybe a dev, test, production types of environments, and you're ready to migrate data from either dev to test or from test to production, and you're going to end up using the migrator tool later on. This would be a quick way to get a copy of that clone ready to go for migration.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're needing a clone while people are actively developing in your development copy and you don't want to kick them out, perfect example.
When you run a schedule like that to create a clone, is that clone available to download through the admin console, or do you have to go into the file system to get to it?
As far as I can tell, I have not seen anywhere that those would be located at. I would treat it the same as a scheduled backup.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I don't see any options. You can duplicate it, run it, delete it. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Maybe
also
someday.
Bryce, can I ask you, I'm pretty sure it runs very fast compared to a full backup, depending on the data set that you have in your normal file, but the file still has to be paused, right? Or something like that for it to run.
I have not tested that. I guess I could run that real quick and just take a look at the one file that I have.
I'm not sure you're going to see that happen, but
It might
Yeah, it
be
would
a
probably be
little too
like in a
quick.
log, wouldn't it?
Most likely, yes.
If you could get that.
I don't know
because
if
my
browser's
thinking
gonna
is
play
just the
nice with
same
this.
way, like FileMaker is not going to know that the schema is, like, to us, the schema is less likely to change than data, but to FileMaker server, you know, it's almost as likely. It just knows that it serves the file, and if
Mhm.
it wants to have something clean to generate the backup file, even though it's like we say it's a clone, you know, normally in FileMaker Pro, when we run that, it's a save a copy as operation, but on here, I would guess that it has to pause the file to run it, even so, like the fraction of a second that it must be taking or something like that.
If it were logging it, I don't see it in the event log. I see at least whenever I click to run it now and when it completed. There might be some other more detailed log that has it, but
While you're right here, Bryce, so this is later on in some of the release notes, but there's a convenient download all logs button in the log viewer now. Been desired by yours truly for a little while. Why don't we keep riffing with you're sharing your screen? You got a couple of other items that you were gonna show us this evening.
yeah. The next one I had in queue, just going through these tabs at the top, was again another feature that I have heard was available before, but like I said, I've only been in the FileMaker space since about 17, and really only had a lot of experience with the newest, latest version of major version, I should say, of the admin console, I believe, which came out in like 17. Was the ability to still access the admin console after the database server itself has stopped. So I'll give that a few seconds. Good. And so through 17 up until I guess 19.6, you would just see a blank white screen with some text and a button that says to start the database server. So now you are able to come in here and look at all the different settings. You can modify some things you can't. Like I don't believe you're able to create schedules at all, or create script schedules, because
I see it create schedule. Maybe the UX needs some work. Try it.
so I tested it right before
Okay.
this, and I don't think you're able to list the schedules to choose unless it is actually open. I tested it with a file and with credentials, and it just said the credentials weren't correct
Because the
in order
file's not
for
actually open to work within.
it. It
Okay.
didn't specifically say that, but that's my assumption.
Yeah.
Because it was the exact same error message you'd get if the file itself was closed and the database server running. So that is one thing I did test, but I also tested just turning different things on and off, setting different settings, enabling different connectors on and off. And those all seem to persist after turning the database server back on. As for use case, I'm not really quite sure on the best use cases that might come out of this. It is kind of feels a little more responsive, or a little more like, hey, I am not running. Whereas before you would just get that white screen. Maybe you would click start the database server and you don't really see anything that's going on at all. Whereas here you can start it and we'll give it a couple seconds, but just like that, it is back on.
Yeah, it's a little more comforting, isn't it, to see other things, other data points besides the server not running at this point.
Yeah, there's been a couple cases where the just staring at the white screen waiting for it to turn on, just like, I don't know if it's starting. I don't want to go look at digging up the logs real quick, but like I said, a little more comforting. I can agree with that. And the last one that I was going to discuss is surrounding more about security. Greg or someone else can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 19.4 that released IP restrictions for the admin console. I think it was 19.4 because Claris moved the admin console port away from 16,000 to 443. And so if you have WebDirect enabled and open to the internet on your server, then effectively anyone has access to your admin console as well. they don't necessarily have your credentials, but they can at least get to the admin console, and that can be a security concern. And so before 19.6, there was an engineering blog that Greg shared with me that you'd have to go into the HTTPD config file, and at the bottom there's some commands down here that you could uncomment and essentially put in here IP addresses that you'd like to whitelist. That can be very cumbersome. Having to go in there every single time and update that. Some people may not be as comfortable working with config files like this, especially Linux servers. This happened to come from a Linux server that I'm showing here. And so now...
now you're saying it's easier?
Thankfully, yes. And so I just want to show that here's a demo I put up. This is available to me on my home address, and this is on a Windows VM at our office in St. Louis. And so, well, first off, I could get to there, but then I can also log in. But say I come in here and turn this on, any address in here, comma separated, will be the only addresses that can ever actually reach the admin console. I shouldn't say that because, as Greg and Valentin and I discovered earlier, you are technically reaching the admin console through this way, but it somehow FileMaker server is filtering out those IP addresses and directing you away from it. So if we come back here, different IP address, you'll actually get a message with your IP address saying that you don't have access to that anymore. So being that they changed to the standard HTTPS port 443, we think that this would be a really good standard practice to get in place, and something that we are working on getting in place across the board for ourselves.
And that was admin console and admin API, correct?
Yes. Thank you for the correction.
There are a lot of other things that Claris has done, and I tend to run into this situation where we have a meetup and we start digging in and might run out of a little time. What I'm going to do is post, at least get these links, these URLs into our Meetup website to share with the forum. There are a lot of different details here. We just touched on some of them in server, some of those that are really easy to demo for you. There are a lot of good security issues that have been addressed. Some default, for example, filtering databases by default, something that maybe not everybody knows that they should do to require a password before just letting somebody see the list of files. The FM data migration tool is now installed with the FileMaker server. Here's a path. Like I said, a lot more that's included in here, not all of it demoable. Some of it's just performance-based or security-based. There was a recent release of server 19.6.2. It came out pretty quickly. A few items addressed there. I'll let you read those. We can't leave without mentioning that Cloud had an update as well, FileMaker Cloud, or Claris FileMaker Cloud in December. And then lastly, can't leave this child behind, Claris Connect. In December had some new features and enhancements. Some of those are including some additional connector support. And those are listed here as a reference. A couple of different times. We had December 22 R2 and R1 had a few others. But I want to be respectful of everybody else's time here. Thank you for sticking around and being a part of the meetup. We look forward to seeing you the next time. And if you have any other questions about what was covered here today, feel free to reach out to us through the Meetup website is a good start, at least. Thanks, everybody.